And as a follow-up to our Fiat Chrysler meeting yesterday, I thought I'd have David Adams, our electronic I-9 Everify consultant, just take you through a brief overview of our Tracker I-9 product. Take it away, David, and we're glad you're going to provide this overview.
Yeah, I'm David Adams, and I have been in the electronic I-9 business starting with the inventor of the application back in 2004, who sold to Walmart this app before there were even federal regulations governing electronic signature on electronic Form I-9. What you're looking at is the most user-friendly and always legally up-to-date Tracker Quick Search product. It's the best that there is. I'm going to give an overview of what it does for you real briefly while we sit and look at the dashboard. First off, it takes you entirely paperless from the minute you start going with it. It mimics the I-9 process. The electronic I-9 itself is the legal document with electronic signature. And if you have a policy of retaining copies of all List A, B, and C presented documents for Section 2, those can be attached in Section 2. It will eliminate, if you're an E-Verify client company, about 90% of the time that you're currently spending on E-Verify data entry. It'll just take the I-9 data and with a couple of button clicks, shoot it right over to DHS. The system, we can design it to mimic your corporate hierarchy for I-9 purposes, so that if you have a headquarters and a multiplicity of hiring locations, and that is how you're filing your paper I-9s now, we can set up the same filing system here for electronic I-9s, so that your hiring managers at the hiring locations would have access only to those I-9s at that location, or only some of them if they're not at admin level users. And corporate would have access on an admin level to headquarters and all of the hiring locations that there are, so that you could oversee everything going on out there. For a headquarters admin, the dashboard would have a lot more action on it than it would out at the various hiring locations, because everything would theoretically feed into your dashboard at headquarters. And it eliminates all of your compliance issues going forward with Forms I-9. It won't allow for errors. The only thing it cannot dictate is that you do the I-9s on time, but it can alert you that you're pressing up against deadlines right here on this dashboard. John's already logged in. Anytime any of you log in, you'll see a dashboard that will, under the task summary, reflect the level of access you have and the number of I-9s in your purview. Headquarters, theoretically, again, would see everything going on out there and could reach out to hiring managers if there's a next action pending that is getting very, very late and you're concerned about it. So there are many ways to monitor for the one thing that it cannot enforce, which is late I-9s, but it can alert you, and you can watch out for that. The I-9 task summary is going to show you next actions needed right down the middle of the page there. Start date in Section 2 would be applicable when there is a Section 1 of an I-9 in the system, and the system is waiting on a start date to know when to start the countdown. Section 1 due will show when you have sent out a single-use URL to your employees for them to fill out a Section 1 of an I-9 ahead of time before coming in to office to present List A, B, or C documents on first day of employment, or before if you run classes with onboarding prior to that. The only way the system can know that a Section 1 is due, and we'll get to this in just a few minutes, there are two methods for sending out remote employee logins, and we'll cover that in a minute. Section 2 due is going to show up when there's a Section 1 in the queue already, with a start date indicated so that the system knows that the thing is due by such and such a date. E-Verify due or pending will show as soon as an I-9 is completed, if you are E-Verify, and I assume you are, and it'll move it to that queue. Employee re-verification due is in the case of aliens authorized to work who have expiring work authorization at some point in the future. And employee receipt re-verification due is going to show up in the case where you've checked the receipt in lieu of original document when an employee has lost his social or what have you and has to go get a replacement. That new original doc will not be in his hands until he receives it in the mail, but there are many contingencies where a receipt from Department of Motor Vehicles or Social Security Administration or what have you is acceptable for initial I-9 purposes, but will start the clock running on a 90-day, generally, deadline to view the original document once the employee receives it in the mail. Each of those blue hyperlinks there will pull up a spreadsheet with everybody listed who is showing up in that number 38 or 22 or whatever it is. And from that spreadsheet, you can right-click on the employee name to open his I-9 in a new tab while keeping your spreadsheet in the original tab rather than refreshing it as you hammer these things out. John has indicated that you're probably interested in the remote employee login. So we're going to go there first. You'll just go from your dashboard to create this. In the case, there are two methodologies for this. The multi-use new hire login, and John's going to show it to you right now. While we're waiting, you'll note up at the top, employer action restoration, work site, none selected. In y'all's case, your hierarchy would be built in, and you can select an individual work site for each of these unique multi-use new hire login pages. Each will be a separate URL, in that case, if you have a multiplicity of hiring sites. And for each hiring site, this URL can go out to all of the employees hired there as part of their onboarding package. It'll work forever. It'll take them to a fresh, clean Section 1 of an I-9 when they click on it. And that's a very useful tool because you can just generate the URL and embed it into your onboarding. However, it does not indicate anything to the system. The system won't know to expect an I-9 on a certain date from each of these employees, so you would have to monitor off the dashboard as to who has and has not done these prior to first day of employment. The second method is the single-use new hire login. John, go ahead and click on that.
Okay, you want me to do that, David? I'll click on that.
Yes, in this case, the usefulness of this is that by entering the employee's name, start date, and email address here, number one, the system will send the email out with a unique URL for each employee, and the system now knows the start date. So there will be an expected Section 1 of an I-9 from these individuals, and the system will list that in the spreadsheet under Section 1 due, because with the start date in the name, it knows to expect a Section 1. And by using this, you can monitor it before there's an I-9 in the system, one that you're expecting. Let's go back to the dashboard, John. The other method is something similar to what you're probably doing now. Go ahead and create new I-9 complete record, John. In a class, if you do it that way, or with each individual coming in, the hiring manager can log in, create new I-9, and hand keyboard and mouse over to the employee for him or her to fill out Section 1 of the I-9 and sign and date it electronically. That's what you're seeing right here. This is something similar to what the employee would see with the remote login, although that works a little bit differently. So they'll see something slightly different with Section 1 fields all there and the signature boxes all there. And you can also configure that to where the employee, if you retain copies of List A, B, and C documents, and I assume you do, the employee can upload scans of those while using the remote login URL. If you're doing it this way, then you will have pulled up Section 1. John, if you want to, you can hurriedly fill it out so we can move on to Section 2. The employee has to fill in every jot and tittle, just like the employee has to complete a Section 1 of the paper I-9. So he'll be handling the keyboard and mouse at this point with the employer having logged in. If you want to do it there at location, both Sections 1 and 2, without the employee having previously completed a Section 1 of an I-9. And John, don't forget you'll need N/A and other names, and with the new very picky I-9 regulations, the USCIS expects something in every field of a Section 1 of an I-9 all the way down to the preparer or translator check boxes. And that includes, even though email, phone number, middle initial, and other last names are not required fields on an I-9, they at least have to have an NA. So the employee having completed all this, in this case, John has done so many demos, he's entered a Social Security number that flags as duplicate. It's a useful tool. In this case, we're going to ignore the fact that it's a duplicate because we know why it is. But you're able to pull up, John, enter an NA for apartment number. You can pull up with these options the entire list of duplicate socials, which you certainly shouldn't have for multiple individuals, though it could show up in a rehire situation. That being done, the employee needs to click on the signature box and sign. It's going to ask him for a 5 to 25 character password, a PIN number. The federal regulations require that there be some identifier to tie the signature to an identifier, and that's what this PIN number is for. I did not use preparer or translator, John. And we're signing off. Off to the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see icons. Section 1, in this case, enter the, okay. It's telling you that we need a start date in Section 2, and obviously Section 2 isn't completed yet, so we don't need to worry about the warnings in Section 2. At this point, you've got the keyboard and mouse back as the hiring manager. You'll click Edit Section 2. You've got the employee right in front of you. He's presented his List A or List B and C documents into your hand, and you will choose here. Let's go passport, John. And OK. Now, a quick note, as you are aware, if you are an Everify client, you at least have to retain 3 List A document copies: passport, employment authorization card, and permanent resident card. And those are required for photo matching. So you, as you're again aware, know that you need to have a universal policy on what your document retention requirements are for all employees. In this case, John has chosen, or the employee is a citizen, and that will restrict the possible acceptable documents that you've just been able to choose. He's a citizen, and you're not going to be able to choose a foreign passport with a Form I-94 because it's not going to be available to you because he wouldn't have one. So anyway, John, go ahead and fill in the document number and the expiration date. And that'll be a 9-digit for the passport number and a future expiration date. Errors, the system will not allow either the employee or the employer to sign off on his Sections 1 or 2 if there are errors. The Browse button right here is for you to attach a scan of the passport in this case. And as I said before, if the employee has used and you've set it up that way, he can have previously attached that to this from his remote login. In this case, we're not going to attach anything. Down below, your login will have determined the employer, the work site, and your name. So those are all going to be laid in. Some administrative users might have a multiplicity of work sites they could choose if they travel around and get these things done all over the place. You'll enter the employee's start date. We have a space for employee ID if y'all use it. The notes and tasks field are to document strange issues with an I-9. You can use that. System is searchable by notes and tasks, searchable by social, searchable by employee ID, searchable by employee name, and a couple other things. So the employee ID is here. The notes and tasks, neither of those are I-9 fields. Those are separate fields, and they won't print out. If you ever wanted to print out a PDF of the I-9, they won't print with that. You would print them separately. We have a couple checkboxes. Employee hired for 3 days or less. I doubt that y'all ever intentionally hire someone for 3 days or less. That's for people staffing banquets or what have you. Or employee presented an acceptable receipt in lieu of an original document. You would check that if he came in with a receipt in lieu. So we'll go ahead and save and validate. This is the hiring manager again doing this. And it's going to check for errors, and it won't let you go any further if there are any. So we've got a perfectly compliant I-9 on the right. We'll see that there are no icon warnings of any appreciable kind. We're alerted that we still need a signature. We know that. We haven't done it yet. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, John. And the hiring manager will click here to sign section 2. His info is already laid in here. All he has to do is click I agree and sign section 2. We're done. We'll scroll back up to the top here, and we'll see that we have the warning for E-Verify requirement. E-Verify, if you are set up for it, that button right up there will light up, and you'll be able to click it. It'll send all this data over to DHS, and it'll come back with an immediate response. Simply a series of button clicks. Obviously, in the case of a tentative non-confirmation, it would be slightly more complicated, but not much more so. All the documents that would ever be needed to print for any purpose in E-Verify are right here, and will load specific to any individual employee, and his entire E-Verify case will be available once you've completed E-Verify by clicking the E-Verify button, and you'll see all the case details and everything that happened. Off in the upper right, the system captures PDF signature instances for each signature. The topmost one is the most recent. The topmost one has both sections 1 and 2. If you wanted to print it, you would see a completed Form I-9 with all this data on it, indicating section 1 and 2 electronically signed by whoever it is. And that's there for you to print if you ever had any need to. Again, the legal document is this electronic I-9 right here. Additionally, there's an attach button up here. We can discuss in the future whether y'all need help with your file cabinet paper I-9s that are retention required, including for your current employees. And we can take care of all of those issues, including audits and corrections, and getting you ship-shape for an audit should it ever happen from the feds. That's the system in a nutshell. There's a lot of other features on it, a lot of reporting features, a lot of administrative features that you can use to add hiring managers or shut down terminated hiring managers. And one can access and build any kind of report that is available through the information that an I-9 has. Multiplicity of easy-to-use spreadsheets, printable in every way. And that is the system in a nutshell, and happy to discuss further.
David, thank you very much. We appreciate your input, and I'm going to package this up and we'll forward this over to Fiat Chrysler Automotive. Thank you, David.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.